The rain in Seoul didn't fall so much as it dissolved, a fine, pressurized mist that turned the neon advertisements of Gangnam into blurred smears of cobalt and magenta. Maya stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of the penthouse, her reflection a dark, elegant silhouette against the shimmering cityscape. Behind her, the air was heavy with the scent of expensive sandalwood and the sterile chill of high-end climate control. Kang Ji-hoon didn't look up from his tablet. His thumb swiped rhythmically across the glass, moving millions of dollars across borders with the indifference of a man swatting at a fly. He had stopped looking at Maya weeks ago. To him, she had become part of the furniture, a premium asset that had depreciated in value. "The car is downstairs," Ji-hoon said, his voice a smooth, low baritone that still had the power to make her skin prickle. "Your accounts have been settled. The apartment in Paris is signed over. You'll find the transition seamless." Maya didn't turn around. She watched his reflection in the glass. He was a man built on the illusion of absolute control, a modern monarch of the underworld who had traded traditional blades for blockchain and biometric dominance. He thought he was being generous. In his world, discarding a mistress usually involved a shallow grave or a forced disappearance. To be given a penthouse in Paris was an act of supreme mercy. "You're deleting me," Maya said softly. Ji-hoon finally looked up, his dark eyes reflecting the flickering data on his screen. "I'm streamlining, Maya. You've been a delightful companion, but the upcoming merger with the Tokyo factions requires a certain profile. My life is becoming a public record. There is no room for ghosts in the light." He didn't realize the irony of his words. He thought he was the one doing the deleting. He didn't know that Maya had spent 3 years as his closest confidant, not just as a lover, but as the quiet observer who sat in the corner of the room while he discussed server architectures and money laundering loops. He saw a beautiful black woman who provided him with a sense of exotic prestige. He failed to see the MIT dropout who had redesigned his encryption protocols when his own engineers had hit a wall. "I understand," Maya said. She turned then, her expression a mask of practiced serenity. She didn't cry, she didn't beg. That would have been beneath the person she was about to become. She walked out of the penthouse with nothing but a small, sleek handheld device, a modified deck that looked like a standard comms unit. As the elevator descended the 80 stories to the ground floor, she felt the weight of her old life falling away. By the time the doors opened to the lobby, the woman named Maya, the mistress of the Kang Syndicate, was already beginning to fade. The 2026 Underworld was a hyper-connected web of neural links and biometric checkpoints. To exist was to be tracked. Every step Maya took through the rain-slicked streets was logged by the city's central AI. Her heartbeat, her gait, the unique infrared signature of her retinas. She was a glowing dot on 1,000 different monitors. She took the subway to the edge of the Mapo district, an area where the high-tech gloss of the city began to fray into the industrial grit of the past. She entered a small, windowless clinic tucked between a synthetic noodle shop and a hardware recycling center. The technician was a man named Sora, a ghost maker who specialized in digital suicide. He looked at Maya's biometric profile on his screen and whistled. "You're high profile," Sora whispered, his fingers dancing over a holographic keyboard. "Linked directly to the Kang Syndicate's inner circle. If I scrub you and they come looking, they'll find the hole where you used to be. A hole is just as easy to track as a person." "I don't want a hole," Maya said, sitting in the reclined chair. "I want a swap. Feed the system a loop. Let the authorities and Ji-hoon's monitors see me boarding that flight to Paris. Let them see me checking into the hotel. Let the facial recognition software in the 16th arrondissement find me sitting in a cafe every morning for the next 6 months. Sora paused, squinting at her. "That's sophisticated deep-fake telemetry. You're talking about a persistent digital phantom. That takes massive processing power." "I have the keys to Ji-hoon's private server farm in Jeju," Maya replied calmly. I've already carved out a pocket of his own processing power to host my ghost. He'll be paying for his own deception." Sora grinned, a jagged, yellowed thing. "You're a dangerous woman." The process was agonizing. It wasn't just data, it was the physical rewriting of her identity. Sora used a localized EMP pulse to scramble her current biotag, followed by the insertion of a subdermal mesh that would periodically shift her thermal signature. While the machines hummed and the scent of ozone filled the room, Maya watched her digital self depart. On the monitors, she saw Maya pass through Incheon International Airport. She watched the security footage of a woman with her face, her walk, and her luggage board a private jet. It was a masterpiece of code, a phantom that would live the life Ji-hoon had dictated for her, while the real Maya vanished into the shadows of Seoul. When she emerged from the clinic hours later, the world felt different. She walked past a security drone and it didn't chime. She passed a biometric scanner at a convenience store and it registered her as system guest. She was no longer a person in the eyes of the city. She was a glitch, an invisible variable. She moved into a cramped, low-rent unit in the basement of a decommissioned server warehouse. It was a space defined by the hum of cooling fans and the smell of hot copper. Here, surrounded by stacks of salvaged hardware and glowing monitors, she began the work of dismantling an empire. Her first target was the ledger. In 2026, the Kang Syndicate didn't keep books. They used a private sharded blockchain known as the Onyx Link. It was supposed to be unhackable, a distributed ledger that recorded every bribe, every shipment of illegal tech, and every soul Ji-hoon had bought. Maya sat before her screens, her fingers moving with a fluid, lethal grace. She didn't attack the ledger from the outside. That would have triggered the Syndicate's black hole protocols, wiping the data and alerting Ji-hoon's security teams. Instead, she used the back door she had built months ago, disguised as a routine maintenance subroutine. She slipped into the stream of data like a predator sliding into a dark river. The Onyx Link was a beautiful, terrifying thing, a skyscraper of code built on the misery of others. Maya began to explore its architecture. She saw the massive influx of capital from the recent human trafficking expansions in Southeast Asia. She saw the payoffs to the Seoul Metropolitan Police. And there, at the core, she found the Vanguard accounts, the private wealth of Kang Ji-hoon. He thought his money was safe because it was encrypted behind a 40,096-bit neural key, but he had forgotten one thing. He had used his own physiological markers to generate that key. He had used the rhythm of his resting heart rate and the specific resonance of his voice. Maya closed her eyes. She could still hear his voice. She could still feel the steady, cold thrum of his heart against her back in the quiet hours of the night. She didn't need to hack him. She remembered him. She began to synthesize the key. Using a vocal modulator, she recreated the exact frequency of his mercy speech from the penthouse. She layered it with the biometric pulse data she had secretly recorded during their years together. On the screen, the lock on the Vanguard accounts began to flicker. She didn't steal the money. Not yet. That would be too simple, too quick. Ji-hoon wouldn't just lose his wealth, he would lose his mind. He would watch his empire fail in ways he couldn't explain. He would feel the walls closing in, and he would have no one to lash out at, because the enemy didn't exist. Maya initiated the first phase, the shadow ledger. She created a mirrored version of the Onyx Link. Every transaction that went through the Syndicate would now pass through her filter. She began to subtly alter the entries. A shipment of high-grade neural dampeners meant for the Russian markets was rerouted, on paper, to a rival faction in Busan. A payment to a corrupt senator was delayed by a fraction of a second, just enough to miss the cooling-off period and trigger a red flag in the national banking oversight system. These were small, invisible wounds. They wouldn't kill the Syndicate, but they would cause it to bleed. As she worked, Maya felt a cold, sharp satisfaction. She remembered the way Ji-hoon had looked at her as he handed her the settlement. He had looked at her like a problem he had finally solved.
She watched a live feed of the Kang Syndicate's main headquarters. The building was a monolith of black glass and steel, a fortress in the heart of the city. Inside, Ji-hoon would be celebrating his new merger, drinking 20-year-old whiskey and toasting to his own genius. "You wanted a ghost, Ji-hoon," Maya whispered to the empty room, her face illuminated by the cold blue light of the monitors. "Now you have one." She tapped a final command, sending a microscopic piece of polymorphic code into the Syndicate's primary logistics hub. It was a logic bomb, timed to detonate in 48 hours. It wouldn't destroy the system, it would simply change the destination of the next 3 major shipments. She stood up and walked to the small, cracked window of her basement. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the city was still dark. She looked at her hands. They weren't shaking. For the first time in years, she felt perfectly still. The betrayal had been meant to erase her. Ji-hoon had thought that by stripping away her title, her access, and her presence, he would render her powerless. He hadn't realized that by taking everything away, he had given her the ultimate weapon: anonymity. In a world where everyone was watched, the only person with real power was the one who couldn't be seen. Maya sat back down at her desk. There were 3 more chapters to this story, and she knew exactly how each one would end. She began to code the next sequence, her fingers a blur of motion. The first ripple had been sent. Soon, the wave would follow, and by the time Kang Ji-hoon realized he was drowning, the woman who knew all his secrets would be the only thing left on the horizon, watching him sink beneath the weight of his own crumbling legacy. She didn't need a gun to kill him. She was going to delete him from existence, 1 line of code at a time. The silence of the warehouse was only broken by the rhythmic tapping of keys, the sound of a masterpiece being composed in the dark.
The basement was a cathedral of humming cooling fans and the rhythmic clicking of hard drives. In the center of this technological hive, Maya sat bathed in the flickering light of 6 high-definition monitors. The air smelled of ozone and stale coffee, a sharp contrast to the expensive perfumes and silk sheets of her former life. She didn't miss the luxury. The power she held now, distilled into lines of cascading green and white code, was far more intoxicating than any designer gift Ji-hoon had ever bestowed upon her. On her primary screen, the Onyx Link pulsed like a digital heartbeat. This was the lifeblood of the Kang Syndicate, a private, sharded blockchain that recorded every transaction, every bribe, and every movement of illicit cargo. To the world, it was an impenetrable fortress of 4096-bit encryption. To Maya, it was a puzzle she had already solved. She had been the one to suggest the upgrade to the private blockchain 2 years ago, when Ji-hoon was worried about international investigators. She had even written the base layer of the consensus protocol. At the time, he had praised her intelligence, calling her his beautiful genius. He hadn't realized that while she was building his fortress, she was also installing a series of hidden crawl spaces, digital backdoors that only she could open. Maya's fingers danced across the mechanical keyboard, the sound like a rain of pebbles on a tin roof. She wasn't hacking, she was simply coming home to a house she had built. She navigated through the layers of the Syndicate's financial ecosystem. It was a masterpiece of complexity. Shell companies in the Cayman Islands fed into neural network-managed hedge funds in Singapore, which then funneled clean credits back into Seoul's real estate market. It was a closed loop designed to be invisible to the authorities. But Maya wasn't looking for the money itself. She was looking for the logic that governed it. She located the smart contract hub. In the 2026 Underworld, trust was no longer a matter of honor among thieves. It was enforced by self-executing code. If a shipment reached its destination and the biometric seal was broken by the verified recipient, the funds were automatically released from escrow. It was a cold, efficient system that removed the need for middlemen. Maya began the process of quiet insertion. She didn't change the contracts. She added a secondary condition, a polymorphic parasite, that would lie dormant until she gave the command. It was a middleman proxy.
Every time a transaction occurred, a microscopic fraction of a percent, so small it wouldn't trigger any automated audits, would be diverted into a series of ghost wallets she had established. It was a slow bleed, a digital hemophilia. By the time the sun began to rise over Seoul, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and smog-filtered orange, Maya had gained total control over the flow of the Syndicate's capital. She could see every payment Ji-hoon made, from the multi-million-dollar tech smuggling operations down to the automated monthly maintenance for his private yacht. She leaned back, her eyes burning from the hours of screen time. She pulled up the live feed from the Kang Syndicate's headquarters. High above the city, in the ivory tower of his office, Kang Ji-hoon stood at his desk. He looked agitated. He was speaking into a secure comms unit, his jaw tight. Maya activated the remote audio patch she had installed in the office's smart climate control system. "I don't care about the latency issues, Minho. The Tokyo Group is expecting the first installment of the merger funds by noon. If the ledger doesn't verify the transfer, they'll think we're stalling." "Sir, the Onyx Link is showing a synchronization delay. It's negligible, but the consensus is taking 3 seconds longer than usual. We're running a diagnostic." Maya smiled. The 3-second delay was her. It was the time it took for her parasitic code to scrape its tiny percentage and reroute the data through her private servers. "Fix it," Ji-hoon snapped. "The system is flawless. You told me it was the best in the world. Don't let a negligible delay turn into a loss of face." He cut the connection and paced the room. Maya watched him. He looked powerful, a man at the height of his influence, but to her he looked like a marionette who hadn't noticed the strings were being replaced with barbed wire. She moved to the next phase of her plan, the shadow fork. The beauty of a blockchain is its immutability. Once something's written, it can't be changed. But Maya wasn't changing the past, she was gaslighting the present. She initiated a shadow fork. She created a parallel version of the ledger that only Ji-hoon and his top lieutenants could see. In this version, everything looked perfect. The balances were correct, the shipments were on time, and the profits were soaring. But the real ledger, the one that actually interacted with the outside world, was beginning to tell a very different story. She began to leak ghost records into the system. These were phantom transactions that appeared to show Ji-hoon was siphoning off funds for his own private use, hidden from the rest of the board. She didn't make them obvious, she buried them in the noise of high-volume trading days. To an outside observer or a suspicious board member, it would look like Ji-hoon was preparing a golden parachute, getting ready to abandon the syndicate with the lion's share of the liquid assets. As the days turned into a week, the psychological pressure began to mount.
Maya watched the internal comms. The lieutenants were starting to whisper. They saw the discrepancies in the deep audit logs, the ones Maya had subtly allowed them to find. Trust, the foundation of any criminal enterprise, began to crack. "He's moving money into a private account in the Seychelles." She saw one of the captains, a man named Park, message another. "Look at the transaction hashes. They don't link back to the syndicate's main vault. He's cutting us out." "It doesn't make sense," the reply came. "The boss wouldn't do that. Not now, during the Tokyo merger." "Maybe that's exactly why he's doing it. He gets the merger deal signed, takes the initial investment, and vanishes. We're left holding the bag for the Japanese." Maya felt a surge of cold triumph. She was doing more than just stealing his money. She was stealing his reputation. In Ji-hoon's world, a leader who stole from his own was worse than a leader who was weak. A thief was a traitor. She decided it was time for the first physical manifestation of her digital work. The Kang Syndicate's most valuable asset was a shipment of experimental neural link processors stolen from a research facility in Daejeon. These chips were the currency of the future, worth billions on the black market. They were being moved tonight in an armored convoy of self-driving electric trucks, guarded by an elite security contractors.
Ji-hoon believed the route was the most secure in the country. It was mapped out by a proprietary AI that adjusted the path in real time based on traffic, weather, and satellite surveillance. Maya looked at the routing algorithm. It was an elegant piece of software, but it had one flaw. It trusted its inputs. She didn't hack the trucks, she hacked the city. Using her system guest status, she gained access to Seoul's Department of Transportation. She began to feed the city's traffic management AI false data. She created ghost accidents on the main highways. She triggered emergency roadwork alerts on the bridges. The Syndicate's routing AI, reacting to the obstacles, began to recalculate. It looked for the most efficient path through the suddenly congested city. Maya guided it like a shepherd dog herding a sheep. She opens a clear path through the docklands of Incheon, a maze of shipping containers and automated cranes. It was an area with notoriously poor satellite coverage due to the heavy electromagnetic interference from the port's power grid. While the convoy rerouted, Maya moved to the dark web. She entered a high-level clearinghouse for information brokers. She used an anonymous handle that had no connection to her past. She posted a single set of coordinates and a timestamp. High-value cargo, unprotected for 120 seconds. No security response for 10 minutes. The dragon is sleeping. She didn't send the information to the authorities. That would be too clean. Instead, she sent it to the Iron Fang, a desperate, violent splinter group that had been trying to claw its way into the Kang Syndicate's territory for years. They were hungry, they were armed with heavy industrial tools, and they had nothing to lose. Maya watched the convoy through the port's security cameras. The 3 black trucks moved silently through the industrial canyons. They reached the designated intersection, the dead zone Maya had prepared. On the screen, a fleet of unmarked heavy-duty utility vehicles suddenly swerved out from behind a row of shipping containers. They didn't use weapons. They used electromagnetic harpoons to disable the truck's guidance systems and hydraulic rams to pin them against the concrete walls. The Syndicate's security team was caught in a digital vacuum. Their comms were jammed by the localized interference Maya had boosted. Their biometrics, which were supposed to alert the central office if their heart rate spiked, were being intercepted and looped by her parasite code. To the monitors at HQ, the guards were sitting calmly in their seats, their pulses steady. In reality, they were being dragged from the cabs as the Iron Fang crews began to dismantle the cargo locks. Maya watched as the crates of processors were moved from the Syndicate's trucks to the scavengers' vehicles. It took exactly 98 seconds. The Iron Fang disappeared into the labyrinth of the port just as Maya restored the communication lines. The explosion of panic at the Kang headquarters was instantaneous. Maya listened to the audio patch. The room was a chaos of shouting and sirens. "What do you mean the signal went dark? The biometrics showed they were stationary. Why didn't the alarm trigger?" "Sir, the system, it said everything was normal. The logs show the trucks reached the destination, but the destination logs were spoofed. They were 5 miles away from where the screen said they were." "The chips!" Ji-hoon gasped, his voice suddenly quiet and terrifying. "Where are the chips?" "Gone, sir. The recovery team found the trucks empty. The Iron Fang has already posted a victory claim on the encrypted boards. They're mocking us." Maya watched Ji-hoon through the camera. He was trembling, not from fear, but from the sheer, logic-defying impossibility of what had happened. His perfect system had failed him. His flawless fortress had been breached without a single alarm being raised. He walked to the window, the same way Maya used to. He looked out at the city he thought he owned, his reflection ghost-like against the glass. "There is a rat," Ji-hoon whispered. Someone on the inside gave them the route. Someone in the tech team. Someone with high-level clearance. Maya leaned into her monitor, her face inches from his image. "Not a rat, Ji-hoon," she whispered to the empty room. "A ghost." She began to type again. The shipment was just the beginning. The loss of the chips would trigger a clause in the Tokyo merger contract, a penalty that would drain another 20% of the syndicate's liquid reserves. But more importantly, it had planted the seed of paranoia. Ji-hoon no longer trusted his machines, and he no longer trusted his men. Maya opened a new window. It was time to start feeding the paranoia. She began to compile a folder of evidence, doctored emails, encrypted messages, and voice recordings that pointed directly to Ji-hoon's most loyal lieutenant, Park. She wasn't just stealing his empire, she was going to make him tear it down himself. The hum of the basement seemed to grow louder, a triumphant chorus of cooling fans and electricity. Maya felt a deep, cold calm. She hadn't eaten or slept in 24 hours, but she had never felt more alive. The man who had discarded her like a spent cigarette was now watching his world catch fire, and he had no idea she was the one holding the match. She began the final sequence for the night. She didn't want the money she had siphoned into the ghost wallets. She didn't need it. She began to distribute it. Small, untraceable amounts were sent to the families of the men Ji-hoon had disappeared over the years. Larger amounts were sent to nonprofits that fought human trafficking and digital exploitation. She was using his own blood money to fund his destruction. As the first light of true morning hit the floor of her basement, Maya closed her eyes for a moment. She could almost feel the weight of the silk sheets again, the coldness of the penthouse, the silence of being a mistress. Then she opened her eyes and looked at the code. She was the ghost now, and the ghost was hungry.
The isolation of the basement had become Maya's sanctuary. While the world above hummed with the frantic energy of a crumbling empire, she moved with the silent precision of a surgeon. The shadow ledger was now fully operational, a digital cancer metastasizing within the Kang Syndicate's infrastructure. Ji-hoon was unraveling. Maya watched him through the hidden lenses of his own high-security cameras. He no longer slept. He paced his office, his eyes bloodshot, clutching a glass of whiskey that shook in his hand. He had fired his entire IT department, convinced they were all compromised. He was a king without an army, a master of a house where the walls whispered his failures. Maya began the infection of trust. Her target was Park, Ji-hoon's right-hand man for 15 years. Park was the only one who truly knew where the physical bodies were buried and which politicians were on the payroll. Using a sophisticated AI voice synthesis engine, Maya crafted a series of intercepted phone calls. In these recordings, Park's voice, perfectly modulated, carrying his specific Seoul accent, discussed a coup with the Tokyo Syndicate. Maya didn't just stop at audio. She used deep-fake telemetry to overlay Park's likeness onto security footage from a neutral-site hotel, making it appear as though he were meeting with the very rivals who had hijacked the neural link processors. She dropped these files into Ji-hoon's Priority 1 alert folder. The reaction was immediate. Maya watched as Ji-hoon summoned Park to the penthouse. There were no weapons drawn. Ji-hoon prided himself on civilized discipline, but the air was thick with the scent of an ending. "I gave you everything, Park," Ji-hoon said, his voice a hollowed-out rasp. He turned his tablet around, playing the forged footage of Park entering the hotel room. Park looked at the screen, his face draining of color. "Boss, that isn't me. I was in Incheon that night. You can check the biometric logs." "The logs you manage?" Ji-hoon interrupted, his laugh a jagged sound. "The logs that have been glitching for a week? You thought you were the only one who could navigate the deep stream. You thought I was too old to see the snake in my own garden." "I have been loyal for 2 decades," Park shouted, his composure finally breaking. "Loyalty is a line of code, and yours has been rewritten." Ji-hoon didn't kill him. In the high-stakes world of 2026, a bullet was a mercy.
Instead, Ji-hoon initiated a digital blacklist. With a single command, he revoked Park's citizenship, froze his neural-linked bank accounts, and flagged his biometrics as a high-level terrorist threat to the global security grid. Park was erased from society in seconds. He was escorted out of the building by automated security drones, a man who technically no longer existed. With Park gone, the Syndicate's internal cohesion shattered. The other lieutenants, seeing how easily their most loyal peer was discarded, began to scramble for the exits. They didn't rebel, they simply stopped responding. The Syndicate became a ghost ship, drifting toward the rocks. The Tokyo merger, the deal that was supposed to cement Ji-hoon's legacy, was the next to fall. Maya sent the real ledger, the one showing the massive losses and the Iron Fang's successful raids, to the Japanese board of directors. The message was sent from a spoofed account belonging to Ji-hoon's own secretary. The Japanese didn't send a rejection letter. They simply pulled their encryption keys and withdrew their investments. The resulting market crash wiped out 40% of the Kang Syndicate's valuation in a single trading hour. Maya watched as the lights in the Syndicate's satellite offices flickered and died. The empire wasn't just falling, it was being deleted. The final chapter began at 3 a.m. Maya sat in her basement, her hands resting on the keyboard. This was the moment of total erasure. She had spent months gathering every scrap of evidence, every bribe, every human trafficking route, every laundered dollar. It was all indexed, cross-referenced, and translated into 6 languages. She created a data bomb. The trigger was set to a global broadcast, not just to the police, but to every news agency, every social media platform, and every rival syndicate in the world. She looked at the live feed of Ji-hoon. He was alone in the dark of his penthouse. The power had been cut due to non-payment, a glitch Maya had manufactured in the utility grid. He sat by the window, the city lights reflecting off his empty glass. He looked small. He looked like the man he had been before he stepped on the backs of others to reach the top. Maya opened a direct channel to his private tablet. It was the only device still functioning on his emergency battery. The screen flickered to life. He didn't see a face. He saw a line of text. "Do you remember the ghost you created?" Ji-hoon stared at the words. He tried to swipe them away, but the screen was locked. "You told me there was no room for ghosts in the light, but the light is where the shadows are the darkest. You thought I deleted me, Ji-hoon, but I was the one who wrote the delete command for you." He dropped the tablet as if it were white hot. "Maya," he whispered into the empty room. "Maya, is that you?" She didn't answer with words. She pressed the enter key. The data bomb detonated. Across the globe, billions of incriminating data flooded the internet. Interpol issued a red notice within minutes. The Seoul District Prosecutor's Office mobilized its cyber crimes unit. On the dark web, the Iron Fang and other rivals received the master keys to all of Ji-hoon's remaining physical warehouses. The empire vanished. The bank accounts hit zero. The legal protections evaporated. The legacy of the Kang Syndicate was replaced by a digital record of shame that would never be purged. Maya stood up and began the process of wiping her own servers. She didn't want the money she had stolen. She didn't want the power. She wanted the silence. She watched the final video feed of the penthouse. The doors were being breached, not by men with guns, but by the robotic bailiffs of the High Court, their sensors glowing blue as they came to take Ji-hoon into a world of endless litigation and a life sentence in a high-security digital containment facility. Ji-hoon looked directly into the camera lens, his face a mask of total, crushing defeat. He knew now that his ruin wasn't of a rival or a government. It was the work of a woman he had forgotten. Maya turned off her monitors. The basement went black. She walked out of the warehouse and into the cool morning air of Seoul. She was still a system guest. She was still invisible. She merged into the crowd of commuters heading for the subway, just another face in a city of millions. Kang Ji-hoon was gone. His empire was a graveyard of broken promises and corrupted code. The Mistress was dead. The Phantom was at peace. Maya walked toward the rising sun, leaving the ghost of her past behind. Finally, free in a world that didn't even know she existed.